Before we start, tell me where you're listening from in the comments. Maybe you're someone who's faced rejection and wondered, what if? Maybe you're curious about how setbacks shape us differently than success does. Maybe you're wondering what it feels like to encounter someone from your past after your life is completely transformed. This conversation is for you. 28 years ago, when I was a 26-year-old with big dreams but an empty bank account, I met someone who would teach me one of the most important lessons of my life. Not through acceptance or encouragement, but through rejection, so complete and devastating that it changed how I understood myself, success, and what really matters in relationships. Her name was Sarah, and for 6 months in 1996, I thought she might be the person I'd spend my life with. I was wrong about that, but I was right about something else. The experience would shape everything that came after. Today, I want to share the story not to embarrass anyone or settle old scores, but because I think it reveals something important about human nature, the role of rejection in building character, and why the timing of when people enter and exit your life matters more than we usually admit. In 1996, I was nobody special by conventional standards. I had recently dropped out of Stanford's PhD program to start a company with my brother called Zip2. We were living in a tiny office, showering at the YMCA, and eating more ramen noodles than any human should consume. I was passionate about the internet's potential, convinced that we were building something revolutionary, but I had no money, no social status, and no evidence that my crazy ideas would ever amount to anything. To most people, I looked like another tech dreamer who would probably flame out within a year. I met Sarah at a coffee shop in Palo Alto. She was a graduate student in psychology at Stanford, brilliant, beautiful, and came from the kind of established East Coast family where success was measured in generations, not startups. She had that effortless confidence that comes from never having to worry about basic survival, never having to prove your worth to skeptical investors or sleep on office floors. I was immediately smitten, not just with her looks, though she was stunning, but with her intelligence, her dry sense of humor, and the way she could discuss complex ideas with the kind of casual expertise that I envied. She seemed to represent everything I wanted to become: sophisticated, cultured, connected to a world of ideas and influence that felt miles away from my South African childhood and my current hand-to-mouth existence. For 3 months, we dated in the way that broke graduate students and startup founders date: coffee instead of dinner, long walks instead of expensive entertainment, hours of conversation about technology, psychology, philosophy, and the future we thought we were building. I thought it was romantic. I thought our financial limitations forced us to connect on a deeper level, to focus on ideas and dreams rather than material experiences. I thought she appreciated my passion for changing the world, even if the world hadn't yet recognized what I was trying to do. I was wrong about almost everything. Sarah was polite about my circumstances, but I started to notice things, how she would change the subject when I talked about Zip2's potential, how she would compare my situation unfavorably to her friends who were pursuing traditional career paths, how she seemed embarrassed when we encountered her Stanford social circle and she had to explain what I did for a living. The turning point came when I invited her to a dinner party hosted by one of my early investors. It was my first real opportunity to introduce her to the world I was trying to build, to show her that even though I was broke, I was connected to people who believed in the future I was working toward. She spent the entire evening making polite conversation while clearly wishing she was anywhere else. Afterwards, she said the people were interesting in that tone that meant exactly the opposite. She asked why I was wasting my time with these tech people when I could be doing something more substantial with my life. That's when I realized we weren't just from different economic backgrounds. We had fundamentally different values about risk, ambition, and what constituted a meaningful life. Despite the growing tension, I convinced myself that our relationship could work. I was in love, or thought I was, and I believed that love could bridge any gap in understanding or values. After 6 months of dating, I decided to take the biggest risk of my young life, not just emotionally, but financially. I spent $2,000, money I absolutely could not afford, on an engagement ring. This represented weeks of personal expenses, money that should have gone toward keeping Zip2 alive. I planned what I thought was the perfect proposal. A picnic in the hills overlooking Silicon Valley, the place where I was convinced we would build our future together. I had prepared a speech about how I might not have much to offer her now, but I was committed to building something significant, not just for myself, but for us. I never got to give that speech. When I showed her the ring and started to explain my feelings, she stopped me before I could finish. Not gently, not with the kind of caring rejection that preserves dignity. She looked at me like I had just suggested something absurd and slightly offensive. Elon, she said, I care about you, but I need to be realistic about my future. I can't build a life with someone whose biggest accomplishment is a website nobody's heard of. I need stability. I need security. I need someone who's already proven they can succeed in the real world. She went on to explain that while she found my entrepreneurial spirit admirable, she couldn't take seriously the idea of marrying someone who might never amount to anything. She had goals for her life, a nice house, financial security, social status, a partner her family could respect, and I simply didn't fit into that picture. The rejection was clinical, thorough, and devastating. She didn't just say no to the proposal, she dismissed the entire premise that I might ever become someone worth saying yes to. I drove home in a daze, the ring in my pocket feeling heavier than any rocket I would ever build. I sat in my tiny apartment staring at this symbol of hopes that had just been obliterated and experienced what I can only describe as a complete emotional collapse. For about 3 days, I questioned everything. Was she right? Was I deluding myself about Zip2's potential? Was I wasting my life chasing impossible dreams when I should be pursuing traditional career paths that would provide the stability and respect that clearly mattered to people I wanted to impress? But then something shifted. The hurt began to transform into something else. Determination. Not the petty kind of determination that seeks revenge, but the deeper kind that seeks vindication. Not vindication for her, but for the values and vision she had rejected. I realized that Sarah's rejection wasn't really about me personally, it was about what I represented. I represented uncertainty, risk, the possibility of failure. She wanted guarantees that I couldn't provide, not because I lacked commitment or capability, but because the future I was trying to build didn't yet exist. Her rejection clarified something crucial. I needed to find people who could believe in possibilities before they became realities. People who could see potential rather than just current circumstances. People who are excited by the uncertainty of building something new rather than threatened by it. I won't lie and say her rejection didn't motivate me. It did. Every time Zip2 faced a crisis, and there were many, I thought about Sarah's dismissive tone, her certainty that I would never amount to anything. Not because I wanted to prove her wrong, but because I wanted to prove that her criteria for evaluating people were wrong. She had judged my worth based on my current financial status rather than my future potential. She had valued security over ambition, conformity over innovation, established success over pioneering effort. These weren't just personal preferences, they were fundamental disagreements about what makes life meaningful. Her rejection taught me that some people can only love you after you've succeeded, not while you're struggling to succeed. That some people need social validation of your worth before they can recognize it themselves. That some people are attracted to the fruits of achievement but repelled by the process of achieving. This became a filter for every relationship that followed. Not a test of gold digging or superficiality, but a deeper question: can this person love the person I am when I'm building something uncertain, or do they only love the person I become after I've built it? 2 years later, Zip2 was acquired by Compaq for $307 million. Overnight, I went from broke entrepreneur to multimillionaire. The transformation was surreal, not just financially, but socially. Suddenly, people who had dismissed my ideas were calling them visionary. Women who had found my circumstances unappealing now found them fascinating. I started PayPal, which sold to eBay for $1.5 billion. Then Tesla, then SpaceX, then a dozen other ventures that grew my net worth into the hundreds of billions. Each success validated not just my business instincts, but my conviction that the future belongs to people willing to risk comfortable presence for extraordinary possibilities. But success also revealed something troubling about human nature. Many of the same people who had been skeptical or dismissive during my struggling years now claimed to have always believed in my potential. They rewrote history to position themselves as early supporters rather than late converts. This revisionism wasn't malicious. It was psychological self-protection. Nobody wants to admit they lacked the vision to recognize potential before it became obvious. But it taught me to be very careful about who gets credit for believing in me and when that belief actually began. In 2008, 12 years after her rejection, I encountered Sarah again at a Stanford alumni event. I was there as a donor and speaker. She was there as an alum and psychologist with a successful private practice. The interaction was awkward in ways that neither of us had anticipated. She approached me after my speech, clearly nervous, and attempted to resume our relationship as if the rejection had never happened. She mentioned how she had always admired my ambition and had followed my success with interest over the years. I was polite but distant, not because I harbored resentment. I was genuinely grateful for the lesson her rejection had taught me, but because I recognized that her renewed interest wasn't really about me as a person. It was about me as a symbol of success, wealth, and status. She had learned that I was worth $2 billion at that point, and suddenly all her previous concerns about stability and security seemed to have evaporated. The same uncertainty and risk-taking that had made me unsuitable 12 years earlier now made me fascinating. During our brief conversation, she made several references to how different she was now, how she had developed more appreciation for entrepreneurial spirit, and had come to understand that traditional paths aren't the only routes to success. She seemed to be auditioning for a role in my life, rebranding herself as someone who could appreciate the journey, not just the destination. But I knew better. People don't fundamentally change their values in their 30s. She had learned to appreciate successful entrepreneurs, not struggling ones. She had developed tolerance for calculated risks that had already paid off, not faith in uncertain ventures that might fail. The conversation was cordial but brief. I wished her well in her practice and her life, and we parted ways. I haven't spoken to her since, though I occasionally hear updates through mutual acquaintances. Sarah's rejection taught me several lessons that shaped how I approach relationships, both personal and professional. First, timing matters enormously in human connections. People enter and exit our lives when we need them to, not when we want them to. Sarah rejected me exactly when I needed to learn that external validation isn't necessary for internal worth. If she had accepted my proposal, I might have become dependent on her approval rather than developing my own conviction. Second, rejection often reveals incompatible values rather than personal inadequacy. Sarah wasn't wrong for wanting security and stability. Those are legitimate desires. But I needed someone who could find security in shared purpose rather than external circumstances, who could find stability in mutual commitment rather than financial guarantees. Third, love requires faith in potential, not just appreciation for actualization. The right person for me would need to love the person I was becoming, not just the person I had already become. They would need to see possibilities that others couldn't see, to believe in dreams that others found unrealistic. Fourth, success changes how people perceive your past, not just your present. Once I became wealthy, many people retroactively decided that my early struggles were visionary rather than foolish. This taught me to be skeptical of people who claim to have always believed in me, especially if their support only became vocal after my success became obvious. I'm genuinely grateful to Sarah for rejecting me, not in a petty look what you missed way, but in a deeper sense of appreciation for the clarity her rejection provided. If she had said yes, I might have spent years trying to conform to her vision of success rather than pursuing my own. I might have chosen safer paths to prove my worthiness to someone who valued security over innovation. I might have become successful in conventional terms while abandoning the unconventional dreams that eventually defined my life. Her rejection forced me to clarify my values, to choose between approval and authenticity, between fitting in and standing out. It taught me that the right person would be attracted to my ambition rather than threatened by it, excited by uncertainty rather than paralyzed by it. More importantly, it taught me that rejection can be redirection. When someone says no to you, they're often saying no to a version of yourself that wouldn't have served your highest purpose anyway. The person who rejects you for your lack of conventional success is probably not the person who would celebrate your unconventional achievements. Sarah's rejection was part of a larger pattern I've observed throughout my life. People's ability to see potential is directly related to their tolerance for uncertainty. Those who need guarantees before they invest emotionally are rarely the ones who help create the extraordinary. This applies to business partnerships, friendships, romantic relationships, and even family dynamics. The people who believe in you when you're unknown are fundamentally different from those who believe in you after you're proven. Both serve purposes, but only the first group can walk with you through the valley of uncertainty that precedes every meaningful achievement. This doesn't make either group better or worse morally, but it does make them suitable for different roles in your life. Sarah was honest about her limitations. She couldn't invest in potential, only in actualized success. That honesty, while painful at the time, was actually a gift. 28 years later, I think about Sarah whenever I meet someone new, whether in business or personal context. Not because I'm comparing them to her, but because she taught me to recognize the difference between people who can love you through uncertainty and people who can only love you after certainty. This lesson has served me well in choosing business partners, investors, employees, and friends. The best relationships in my life have been with people who saw something in me before the world did, who bet on potential rather than proven results, who were excited by possibilities rather than intimidated by them. Sarah couldn't be that person for me, and that's okay. She found someone who could provide the security and stability she needed, and I found people who could provide the faith and vision I needed. We were incompatible, not inadequate. Her rejection taught me that the right people will see your value before the world validates it, will believe in your dreams before they become reality, will love the person you're becoming more than the person you've already been. If you're facing rejection right now, whether romantic, professional, or personal, consider the possibility that it's not about your inadequacy, but about incompatible values or timing. Ask yourself, is this person rejecting who you are or who you're not yet but could become? If someone can only appreciate you after you've succeeded, they probably weren't meant to walk with you through the process of succeeding. If someone needs external validation of your worth before they can recognize it, they probably aren't equipped to provide the internal validation that sustains you through difficult times. This doesn't make rejection painless, but it can make it purposeful. Every no can redirect you toward a yes that actually serves your growth. Every person who can't see your potential can clear space for someone who can. The goal isn't to prove rejectors wrong. It's to prove your own vision right. The goal isn't to make them regret their decision. It's to make yourself grateful for the clarity it provided. Sarah rejected me before I was a billionaire, and I'm glad she did. Not because her rejection motivated my success. My success was motivated by much deeper purposes, but because her rejection revealed our fundamental incompatibility before I committed my life to someone who couldn't appreciate the journey, only the destination. 28 years later, I can say with complete honesty that she made the right decision for both of us. She needed someone who could provide immediate security and conventional success. I needed someone who could embrace uncertainty and unconventional dreams. We both found what we were looking for, just not with each other. Her rejection taught me that the right person doesn't just love who you are, they love who you're becoming. They don't just appreciate your current achievements, they believe in your future potential. They don't just accept your dreams, they share them. Sarah couldn't be that person for me in 1996, and that's the greatest gift she ever gave me, because it forced me to become the kind of person who could eventually find and recognize that right person when they appeared. Rejection isn't always personal failure. Sometimes it's divine redirection toward something better suited for who you're meant to become. Share this with someone who needs to hear that rejection can be protection, that timing matters more than we realize, and that the right people will see your value before the world validates it. Subscribe if these conversations help you think differently about setbacks in relationships. And remember, the person who can't love you through uncertainty probably isn't meant to celebrate your certainty. What rejection in your life turned out to be redirection towards something better?